let's get started with our first question. How do you define a helicopter parent? Ron, you want to take that one?
Sure. I think they asked me to lead off because I am one. but I don't think I'm that in the degree that many of you have seen. The definition really is that we hover over our kids. And it started probably, we're the type of parents that you see that always make sure the kids have their bicycle helmet on, that they're in their car seat, they have this baby on board sticker in the back of their car. We overprotect our kids, and I think the millennial generation has been referred to as the most coddled generation ever. Well, you can use it in different ways, but it's a real difference from going to college probably when I just showed up after a 20-hour bus ride. My parents didn't even take me with a suitcase and a duffel bag. And we took our last daughter to Hope this year. We had a minivan filled with stuff that we had to leave behind. And with just her and her mom and I. So things have changed with the parents on board on the campuses, but things that I think you can use to your advantage for it.
Does anyone else want to comment on that?
Well, I read about a new term just this morning called Black Hawk that the parents who are really a problem are called Blackhawks, and I don't think we have too many of those. But I think this is a terrific discussion because we can talk about how parents can be the partners with us in their students' education.
Yeah, the Blackhawk is the super engaged helicopter parent. Do you think that we're going to see, and this is open for any of you, but do you think that we'll see more of the Blackhawks as time goes by?
I'm just looking out in the room and thinking, are you going to be like this? Because you're the future in a lot of ways. I think the answer is yes. Unfortunately, because the way society is set up, I think you're going to see more and more intrusive parenting. And as an institution, there's not a lot we can do about the parent skills, but more importantly, how do we respond when parents approach us a certain way?
That's a good point. Ron, I want to go back to you for a second. You, in your parents committee work that you've done, what can you give any examples that illustrate the helicopter parent that you've seen?
Oh, sure. I was talking to an admissions counselor, and he related a story that he had a phone call from a father, who couldn't understand why his daughter wasn't admitted. And he went through the process of basically saying that the scores weren't there and the academics was there, and kind of recommended a course of action to get readmitted. And then she happened to say that the essay, they asked for a couple-page essay, was really written rather poorly and didn't look like high school type of grammar and how it should have been. And the father replied, well, that's absurd because I know it's good because I wrote it.
I think another story to kind of add on to that is in the past year, parents have become more involved. Actually, we have seen parents actually become just over-involved in terms of on-campus jobs. We had a parent in the past year that came and picked up an application for their son, filled it out, brought it back, and then did the follow-up call. In that whole process, we never saw the son.
It was interesting. I don't know if anyone saw Sunday's paper, but there was an article in it about helicopter parents going to job fairs.
Right.
And doing the exact same thing of filling out applications, and the son or daughter wasn't even there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Terry, was this a freshman, sophomore?
No. Upper class student.
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about how helicopter parents do impact our work and the work that we do every day. Terry, do you want to add a little bit more to?
Yeah. I think one thing is you don't necessarily, in terms of residence life, and from my background, you not only have, say, 250 residents in an area or in a building, you also have, say, 500, because you're not just dealing with those residents, you're also dealing with the parents, and really that adds another aspect to your job, because it is difficult when you hear of a roommate conflict or a roommate issue. You may hear the student's point of view, and then you have to hear the parent's point of view. And then usually it's not even the same thing. Or maybe it's even the parent initiating the first phone call to say there's a roommate conflict, and then when you approach the roommates or the student, there's no conflict at all. So it's just another extra step that's added on in this whole process.
With your work in housing, has your office done anything to work with parents on the front end to kind of redirect them and give them some pointers?
Yeah, I think one of the things that Aquinas does in their parent orientation is they physically separate the parents from the child. And they're really interested in, when they're doing their scheduling and they're doing their planning for their year, the parents want to be there, the parents want to be involved and actually do it for them. And I think even that physical separation really helps in terms of that.
So you haven't had to employ parent bouncers yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Andy, I guess I'd throw that question at you too. In your role at Grand Valley, what kind of impact have you seen in not only your work maybe, but also other staff that you supervise?
Well, clearly parents are following students around. I was debating this morning, should I tell stories or be more clinical? I think stories are more entertaining, but one of my favorite stories is I was following a tour group on campus, and there was obviously it was a mother, and she was on the cell phone, and she was repeating verbatim the tour guide's information. We're entering this building, and she said, we're entering this building. And I had to tap her on the shoulder, and I said, excuse me, who are you talking to? And she said, well, my son, he was too busy to go on the campus tour, so I'm telling him as we go through the tour. And I said, and I could look at the other parents and they're like, yeah, she's bothering us, because she was echoing kind of what was going on. So I really didn't have a response to that. But what I'm finding is kind of what they're describing is you'll get an initial phone call, and it's often in a housing situation, I'm calling, and I can almost set the calendar to this, like Thanksgiving and the holiday breaks. Closer you get to finals, the more evil the roommate becomes. And it gets to the point where you can almost guess that if someone's doing poorly academically, it's the result of the roommate. In fact, they will say the roommate's broke, my son or daughter's too busy to deal with this, please intervene and replace the roommate. So, and when you add Facebook and my place, and I think that's MySpace, I'm sorry. Facebook is the one I'm the most familiar with. You're getting parents that are actually going online and looking at roommates to be, and then calling to complain about those selections. So it's no longer something you can do very passively. You mentioned parent orientation. We're taking more of an active role. I found that parents, for the most part, want a list or a behavior that they can do. What does a good parent do? So if you don't define that for them, they will define it for themselves. So in our parent orientation, we spend a lot of time talking about letting go, and this is what good parents do, and developing your son or daughter's ability to make good decisions and be supporters rather than doers. So to answer your question succinctly, we're almost advising parents on how to be a good parent of a college student. And we used to not do that, but if we don't do that, they develop their own list of things that are good parenting skills. So,
right. Which you may not necessarily agree with.
Correct.
Right. Michelle, do you have anything to add about the impact on your work?
Well, just being able to convince parents that students are capable of making their own decisions, and what we try to do quite a bit of is educate parents on how to let go and let their student get on with their life. In the Office of Student Life, our primary contact with parents is through our transitions orientation program. So with new students at the beginning of the fall, we run a transfer session as well for transfer students, and I've noticed that over the last couple of years you'll get a few hundred students show up for transfer orientation. Maybe 5 or 6 of them will bring their parents with them that want to sit through the session. These are students that have already been to college and are just moving to a different institution, and we bounce them out. We don't let them stay for the program, and really try to let them know that, okay, they'll be done in 3 hours. You can come back and get them, but this program isn't for you. The other kinds of calls we get are related to the student being involved on campus. So are they joining a fraternity? Do they have questions about that? Are they concerned about the activities that their students getting involved in? And again, trying to make sure that, is this the concern of the parent or is it the concern of the student? And we would rather have that contact with the student. So we'll take the call from the parent and we'll encourage them that there's resources available to help their student with whatever issue's going on, but we really need to hear from the student to help solve the problem.
Yeah. Have you had parents telling you that they're paying for this, they're the primary investors, and they have some rights that go along with that?
I think Andy probably, and Terry gets that more than...
Just a comment, the theme I get a lot is customer service. I'm the customer, therefore I'm always right, therefore do it my way. Seems to be a shift as opposed to an educational process. So we're seeing more and more of that, correct?
I guess I would reverse it a little bit. Are there any positive impacts that you have seen from a helicopter parent? Or any situations that might have turned out in a positive way? They're like, no.
Come on.
Well, I think in student life we try to take advantage of that relationship that we know that parents have with their students, especially when they come for orientation at the very beginning of their college experience. When we've done that separation, the students are at orientation registering for classes and the parents are with us, and we're giving them lots of information about what their student will experience. With our student life presentation, we let the parents know your students will listen to you, you have a good relationship with them, you can help them make good decisions and manage their time without getting overly involved. And so we ask them at the outset, be our ally in helping your students succeed. Don't try to do it for them, but here are all the resources that are available to your student to get involved on campus. And so when your student calls home and says they don't have anything to do or they're bored, that parent can then be the ally to encourage their student to get involved, but not to come join the club for them. Or
Right. Pick up the application.
Right.
I'll tell a brief story. As a counselor at GRCC, I got a call last January from a father, and he was concerned. This was about the first week of class for our winter semester, and Dad was concerned because his son needed one more class in order to get to full-time status, 12 credits. He said, my son was a very good high school student. He got a 3.5 his first semester at GRCC, and we really expected more of him. The 3.5 wasn't living up to his full potential, but he just really wanted some suggestions from me. He was on the phone, wanted some suggestions from me about other classes that his son could take. And so while I'm talking to his father, Howard, don't listen to the story. As I am talking to the father, I pull up the student's record. And I said, have you talked to your son about his academic, progress from last semester? Yes, and I've seen his grades. They look very good. Again, he could have done better than a 3.5. And so he was asking for some suggestions from me. I said, because of the federal laws, I really can't give you very specific information, but I would encourage you to talk to your son and really maybe even sit down with him at the computer and have him bring up his own academic records. And as a father-son combination, you could go through those records together and kind of review them. He said, okay. He goes, can I come and see you? I said, are you bringing your son? Yes. I said, yeah, you can come and see me in the next half hour or an hour. And so they come into my office an hour later, and I knew it was going to be a painful drive. He comes in, and the son has his head down like this, and I felt bad for the son. And his dad said, well, he confessed on the way here. It was a 1.5 GPA, not a 3.5 GPA. So the son had kind of done a little, computer work and handiwork and printer and all that good stuff, and had redid his GPA. But I kind of consider that a positive impact of helicopter parenting, because I took that moment to work with both of them and kind of help them reassess their relationship and probably their level of trust with each other too. But those kinds of shifts take time, and in terms of utilizing resources, they do take time. So there are probably many more negative impacts than positive impacts. I wanted to ask our panel about the impact of the helicopter parent on the development and learning of the student, because I think that's something that we're not seeing a lot of in the literature yet. But wondered if anyone, Andy, maybe you could respond to that.
I kind of had heads up on this question, and so initially I thought, well, what are you really inhibiting by being overly involved with students? And I just started writing and looking at the literature briefly, and I got to 2 pages before without no effort, but I just want to kind of summarize some of the things that are kind of inhibited when you get overly involved. An obvious one is managing emotions. If you're kind of taking care of everything, the student never really kind of gets to solve it for themselves. Autonomy. If you're making all the decisions, then you kind of reach the conclusion it's easier to let a family member solve it, so I don't need to have any decision-making skills. Identity issues. Sense of self. Who am I? Am I a child, student? You know, and just the whole identity development really gets muted when families are involved. Communication and interpersonal skills, interdependence and independence. Cell phones, IM, technology has really kind of inhibited the ability to kind of develop relationships with each other. Risk-taking and growth. You're not allowed to make mistakes. Self-reflection, which in my role I have to do all the time, like did I do a nice job or should I have done more? I think students are no longer allowed to be self-critical and accept self-responsibility. More specifically, there's only my truth. There aren't other truths, only my truth. Learning, you mentioned a good example of the academic success. It is a skill to be able to learn on your own or be self-directed, and when other people are doing your work, your applications, your jobs, it gets a little more difficult. Most of you recognize challenge and support. It's really challenge and deflect. You're getting to the point where that's a challenge. Who can I deflect this to? Issues of wellness, specifically alcohol and drugs. How do I make decisions about things that may impact my health? Personal safety. I'm always a victim. You know, something happened to me. How do you set boundaries as a person that's always being told what to do? Diversity. How do you deal with someone that's different than you? I think if you always listen to your family, you're not taking those risks, and everybody that's different is clearly an impact on you. And then there's these teachable moments. Often as an administrator or a helping professional, something will happen to a student, they'll miss a deadline, and there's a consequence, and sometimes that's the best lesson. I think we deny that when parents get involved. Well, there are no consequences. There's always the safety net. And then, I kind of took it one step further. What are the parents going through? And the best example I could come up with is parents are going through the letting go process, which to me is more like grieving. They've gone through their whole life. And if you think about the stages of grief, parents are really kind of in shock and denial and bargaining, and some of those same issues kind of play out. So often with parents, I'll say, where are you at on this? And you get quiet or silence, because they really are sad about the change in their own life. So there are other issues, but I thought I'd kind of point these out as an example, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to discuss these further.
Ron, I'm going to pick on you for a minute.
Okay.
You started off by saying that you were probably a helicopter parent, or were a helicopter parent. Do you really think that you were a helicopter parent?
I think we had some aspects of it, not to the degree that we had, but we arrived at campus. We helped our daughter in with setting up her dorm room. We made numerous trips to Walmart to get things. I've probably occasionally called the finance office to find out about some bills and things. But did I call professors and call her up in the morning to make certain she was going to classes and all those horror stories? No, I didn't do those, but I sure have heard those type of things. But I think and what Andy was saying also is the letting go part for parents now. If you look at it, the parents usually have a closer tie with their kids than like when I went to college. My parents couldn't wait to kick me out of the house and get me on. Probably why they didn't even take me to college. They wanted to get me that bus trip. I remember driving back, and we lived in Kansas at the time, and we dropped our first daughter off at Kelvin. My wife cried almost half the way there because it was very emotional. Her first daughter was leaving. It was hard on me too, but I think that's a big change, and you see a lot more of that now. So I think you need to understand where parents are coming from. They generally have a very good tie, usually, with their son or daughter, And it is very emotional for them. But that's where some things can really help. And I know at Calvin, beyond the Parents Council, where we help and do some things talking with parents about that.
Good. You know, not too many years ago, I noticed that when the helicopter parent was coming in, swooping in for a landing, that the child protested a little bit more. I don't see the children protesting anymore. Do you see the same thing, or?
I would say that I'd started working in orientation at college campuses about 10 years ago, and where I worked, we had that separation of the parents, you stay here and your children will go off with their academic advisor, and the parents would be in an uproar.
Oh, sure.
Where are you taking them? What are you doing? And the kids were fine.
Right.
They're like, hey,
and
I'm
glad,
here.
probably.
And happy about it, and ready to go off on that adventure. Now it's the cell phones. Everybody's got their cell phone out. The parent will sit in the session that we offer, and the student is on their cell phone with the parent. Both are in wherever they are on a point in campus, and okay, I'm signing up for this class, and is this okay, and checking on that. So it would be nice to institute a cell phone ban at orientation. I don't know if we would.
I just have to comment. We had a similar workshop like we're doing today at Grand Valley, just for Grand Valley folks. It was like a lunch bag kind of series. And there were 10 administrators and staff that showed up, and 2 sets of parents. And I kind of said, well, why are you here? Well, our daughter goes here, and we just thought this would be a nice session. And I'm like, how would you know? Well, they got it off our website that it was an employee kind of session, and they enjoyed it. They contributed, and they thanked us. So there are no boundaries.
And I think, too, you look at just in campus tours, I mean, people coming through, it's the parent in the lead, and the child is usually behind. It's the parent asking the question, child doesn't ask the question. It's all, you can just in the behavior and just the interaction, you can see it just on a general campus visit.
It certainly has shifted. My next question is a little bit of a statement and a question, and we've talked a little bit about this already, but we know that students will be able to develop and mature to a stage of independence if they're allowed to be responsible for their decisions, their academic and collegiate experiences. What are some strategies that you guys have used that have been successful in communicating and working directly with those parents to develop a healthy relationship that also promotes independence for the student? Michelle, do you want to take a stab at that?
I'm glad that the mainstream media is recognizing helicopter parents and what they are. I think that has helped parents understand. They've already read the articles, and last May, Newsweek magazine came out with a whole section on baby boomer generation and their role as a helicopter parent. They featured a quiz that Dickinson College gives their parents. And I think the College Board has kind of jumped on it too. And you can go online and take the quiz, are you a helicopter parent? And it gives different situations of how often do you talk to your student or text message them or instant message them? What happens if your student is having a problem in a class? Do you call the professor or do you let them handle it? Just asking questions from those different scenarios, and then it gives you a rating on whether you're a helicopter parent or not. But the quiz also gives you, for each question, some tips on how to handle that situation and to assure a parent that your student can handle this problem. Here are some tactics you can take. So that's one way that colleges are dealing with it. I think it's just very common in an orientation process. That's generally the first time that you're getting that enrolled student and their family, and in some cases it's the only time you'll have them together to really communicate with them about the roles that each of us play, whether it's the university's role, the parents' role, and the student's role. So separating them at that orientation program. With every program you have a giveaway, and we've joked about that we want our giveaway to be scissors so we can cut that umbilical cord and help parents understand that, okay, it's time to get going. The University of South Carolina gives this book to parents. It's called Letting Go, A Parent's Guide to Understanding the College Years, and I think it's in a 5th edition now, but I've got the 4th, and this book's been out for over a decade, and that university and others give that book out to parents, or you can put it prominently at your bookstore and encourage parents to get that along with their students' textbooks so they can help play a role in that. I've brought a few copies of what we give out at Grand Valley called the Family Guide, and I know that most colleges have something to offer their parents of their students. But the Family Guide offers some tips from experienced parents about the kinds of communication that you can have with your students. Like I discussed earlier, the Office of Student Life, when it gives the parent presentation, it's you are our ally, but you've got to let your student make their own decisions, but here are things that you can do to communicate with them. We even talk about the car ride home from that day, that you're going to drive home from orientation, what are you going to talk to your student about? Because the student has concentrated on registering for class, but the parent has learned about all the opportunities. So that day they can really spend some time talking about how that student will make the transition to college. There's lots of other publications that are out there. The National Orientation Directors Association put together a new book on working with parents. But there's more and more programs going on now. I think more and more colleges and universities are even opening, if they haven't already, a parent's office or office of parent concerns. Sometimes it's connected to development or alumni relations. When I first started working in student affairs, the parent office was connected to student life. So we had an 800 number hotline that parents could call, and we answered it and tried to be an ombudsman of sorts to help parents with questions, and that was 10, 12 years ago. So there are different tactics that you can take to work with parents to help them communicate. Some universities give out a calendar that have a timeline of a student's experience and lists of questions that parents can ask when they're having those daily phone conversations to help that student develop. I was walking around campus the other day, and a student came out of a classroom building, and he immediately got on his cell phone, and I overheard him telling his mom about the test he just took. And I thought back to my own college experience when my mom called on Saturday mornings, and she called me in my room, and that was it. You had a once-a-week conversation, and now we know that students are talking to their parents several times a day about the different things happening in their lives. And what I have to remember is the parent often hears the initial reaction that a student has to a problem, that they'll call crying about whatever crisis has just erupted, but they don't see it 2 hours later after the student has processed what has happened and they've talked to their friends, and it really wasn't that big of a deal. The parent only heard that, hey, I'm having this problem and it's the end of the world and what can you do? And if you're a parent, of course your instinct is to go swoop in and take care of it, but by the time the parent really can do something or think they can do something about it, the student's already taken care of things. So encouraging on our end the students that we see to communicate the good stuff to their parents too, I think is important.
That's a good suggestion. Very good suggestion. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to that?
Those are excellent points, Michelle. I was just going to play off that. It's called the toxic phone call, where the student will call the parent and just dump everything that's bad about the roommate, the school, and then they feel better. And then the parent's holding the phone like this, kind of, what do I do with this? I mean, you've left your parent where you were just kind of venting, and they don't always know that. Just to agree with Michelle, I got a call this week from a parent, and I said, can I help you? And she said, I'm calling to find out what's going on. And I'm like, well, who are you? And she told me. I said, well, who's your student? And she told me, and I said, well, I haven't talked to her. And she said, oh. Like, well, I just had your name, and I was just calling to see if you knew what was going on, and neither one of us knew what was going on, other than she felt she had to call an office to find out what's going on. So she went back to talk to her daughter, and I think sometimes students will play the parent card that way. They will tell their parents anything to get them to leave them alone, or to shift the blame or deflect the blame.
That's very interesting.
I think the way your institution handles FERPA makes a difference as well. I worked at Ferris State University in orientation for 5 years, and there the FERPA release form is part of the parent packet, and they talk about FERPA and the regulations and that student information cannot be shared, but then the parent immediately has that opportunity to hand the form to the student and get them to sign it while they're standing there. So, you know, that's one approach. I don't know if it's a positive one or not. And with, I think a couple of years ago, there was a trend of judicial offices to with especially alcohol violations, to send a letter home to the parents if there were a certain number of alcohol violations. And I think Central and Ferris and a couple other schools in the state tried that tactic, and I've been kind of removed from that office most recently, so I'm not sure the effect of that or how it's worked. I don't know if there's people here from those institutions, but deciding as an institution how you will communicate with parents about certain issues and handling those cases. I love your example of encouraging the parent to look with the student at the academic record and getting them to come in, but I've had parents come in to sit in on judicial cases and all those kinds of situations. So taking an institutional philosophy of how you will work with parents, I think, is really useful as well.
Michelle, just as a background question, at Ferris, do you think that increased the number of parents who actually did get signed releases from their kids?
Oh, I think so, but I think it also helped us as administrators. We weren't getting as many calls later on in the year where we had to turn the parent down on their request, and we were able to work more proactively with the parents and their students. I don't think it diminished the number of requests or it affected that either way. I think we'd still get the phone calls, but the way that we were able to handle them because of those release forms being signed made a difference.
Okay. I had a coworker once before she retired, and she had a very distinct way of working with helicopter parents. As she brought the student into her office during orientation, she had very specific places for students to sit, okay, in her office. And she would set the student down, and she would tell the parent, there was a chair right over there for the parent, and she would then have her back to the parent the entire time. It made our dean a little crazy, I think, but but that's one way of dealing with the helicopter parent, not the best way of dealing with the helicopter parent. I wanted to ask our panel, what are some programs or other initiatives that they've been able to implement, either on their campus or elsewhere, that demonstrates the means to move a helicopter parent from the annoyance factor to the ally. And Ron, maybe I thought you could address that a little bit.
A couple of years ago, my wife and I were asked to be on the initial parent council at Calvin College. They had just formed the Parents Relations Office and had a director. And this was made up of 5 or 6 parents from each of the classes, so there's about 30, 35. And we really got involved. And I think the attitude was the parents are going to be there, they're going to come, they're going to ask questions, they're going to be involved, so let's get them focused in the right way. And our role was to be at different activities, at orientation, at admissions type of things, so that the first thing that they hear when they come on campus is there are parents here. There are parents on the council, there's a parent's office, they welcome, the orientation is part of the director's job, and they see that there is a focal person, and that's the director and that's the parents' council. And we set up a booth. We get to their meals. We get to a lot of different places where they are. We sit in on sessions so that they can actually see us. And their point is, and the stress to them is, go talk to these people. If you got questions, talk to the director, talk to the parent, and we kind of serve as the bouncer. We're around so that they know that you need to come and see these folks. And I've actually led some sessions where when the students are in their own sessions, usually when they're signing up for their classes, I'm with the parents and we're talking about all those different lists of things that they ought to be involved with and how to get communications and be involved. And I think that's another part that the office does, is they put out a lot of information to the parents. Booklets, there's an email that goes out once or twice a month. There's a website, so they can get a lot of the answers to their questions without having to call folks and knowing. One of the roles I had that I was really excited about was to work with the admissions departments. They would do regularly college days at high schools. Multiple high schools get together and they have colleges there. We would be part of that and talk to the parents. And then we would also get a list of parents, just like the admissions do, to follow up on students if they're going to come to college. We follow up on the parents. And we actually call the parents and ask them if they had questions. So I think our role really was to take the offense, and that's go after the parents and say, we're here to answer your questions and to be a part of it. And hopefully it's cut down on faculty and administrators getting the phone calls, and we're getting some of those.
Yeah, that would really help to deflect, I think, from the campus, but also not just deflect it away, but also give the parents really good information, a very good resource. That's great, Ron. Does anyone else want to add anything to that?
I think one of the things, and you mentioned it earlier, at Aquinas this year we are sending out a letter home to the parent after the second alcohol violation, and we've only done a few this year so far. So really from that, I've had a lot of positive experience. That letter is shaped as just to let you know your son or daughter has been involved in an incident involving alcohol for the second time. And we also emphasize that we've already taken actions ourselves, and we don't encourage you to take any more upon yourself or upon your child. And what we found is I've gotten each letter that I've sent out this year, I've gotten a phone call back from the parent saying thank you. And in a couple instances, it's really been a key to them of some past problems, maybe in high school, that developed and they had some issues there. And now they were able to be aware and work with us in making the students successful. So we have had a positive experience from that so far.
Anyone else on that?
Just quickly, I was at a parent planning meeting, and one of the things we were looking at was the institutional web page, and we now have decided that our audience is students and parents. You almost have to look at your web page. If a parent was cruising through this, could they find information? So we know students can find it, but we're looking at it through a critical eye to make it more parent-friendly or family-friendly.
That's a good idea. Great. Let's take a few minutes to have some maybe final comments from each of our panelists, if they have something they would like to add. Michelle, I'll pick on you first.
I think the challenge I've had giving the parent presentation is I'm not a parent myself. So to have that credibility with parents and to show them, okay, I'm a longtime college administrator. I've worked with students your student's age for a long time. I know what they're going through. But to not have been a parent myself, I feel like I have to bone up on what that lens is and what the parents are going through, especially now that they're my age, because it didn't used to be that way, and now it is. So just reminding myself that, okay, I'm a trained professional, and I work with students every day, and to have that confidence in working with parents through different situations, that's been my personal challenge.
Great. Ron?
Don't be afraid of us. Most of us mean well. We're probably a little bit over anxious, and I think you have to take it from that standpoint. It's our son or daughter, and we have a real big interest in it. So if you take it from that aspect, that's what we're experiencing, I think you could probably deal with it a little bit on it. It doesn't mean you're not going to get that the Black Hawk parent coming in, and that might be something you're just going to have to experience. But all of what I have found is that the parents do care, and if you channel them into the right places, you can use them, and you can use that energy to help your campus wherever you can put them to use.
Great point, Ron. Thanks. Terry?
I think one of the things, too, is don't forget, and it's mentioned earlier, don't forget about the social skills. Don't forget about those small things when those students are, they may just walk right into your office. You may be on the phone or meeting with somebody. Don't forget, that, maybe no one ever told them that's not okay. And I think just reminding them just those little things, those day-to-day, is a big help.
I would just add, I have to remind myself every time I get a parent interaction is that most parents are calling for advice, information, and they're asking your opinion on how to be helpful. So once I realize that a parent is calling really to be helpful to their student, then I really can be more of a guidance counselor in that type of role. The other thing I've learned to do is, regardless of the parent call I'll say, we're getting along great. Unfortunately, your student needs to be involved in some of this decision making. I will often say, do I have your permission to have my staff or myself contact the students? Sometimes the parents will be, nope, I just feel better. Sometimes, yes, that would be helpful. So I try to end every conversation with, now that we've chatted, what do you think is an appropriate response? And if it's really out there, then I keep talking a little bit more, but I try to guide them to an appropriate response that they choose.
Good comments from each of you today. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. I'm going to ask Eric Mullen to step back up here, and we'll continue with our program.
I'd also like to thank Dr. John Cowles for being here today and to give him a round of applause for his great moderation of our discussion. Thank you. On behalf of MCPA, we just wanted to say thank you to everyone here for taking time out of a busy schedule and being with us today and sharing your time, your energy, your research, your perspective on this matter. I think just personally I found it to be a very engaging discussion. I've already taken down several notes on modifications, enhancements to programs so we can continue to serve our students well and help keep parents at that appropriate arm length so they're involved in a healthy way. So thank you again so much for being here today.